All right, guys, we're back. We're dealing with Harriet Martineau, whose name sounds French, but she's English. I should have mentioned in previous videos, it probably shouldn't come as a huge surprise that the sociology is going to begin in France because of the chaos of the French Revolution. They are experiencing, in the early 1800s, a real recent memory of total disorder. And so it makes sense that they would be the ones who would be looking around saying, you know, we got to figure out what's going on. Like, why were these people all peaceful, a year ago, and now they're cutting people's heads off? Harriet Martineau but she's not French, she's English, although she's going to follow Alexis de Tocqueville a few years later to America to take a look at what America has to offer. But she starts out as a huge fan. Intellectually, she's a genius, and she starts out as a huge fan of Auguste Comte. She's super interested in she's actually kind of a blend of Comte and not exactly Tocqueville, I guess. Maybe she's not a blend. She's a big fan of Comte in the sense that she believes in scientifically studying society. She's also what's called a utilitarian, which is a type of philosopher who believes that we should try to maximize happiness in a society, the most happiness for the most people. So she's approaching society in a sense of a reformer, kind of like what Comte was. Her idea of happiness, this is where she kind of blends with Tocqueville, is about freedom and autonomy. So she's kind of with him on that. People shouldn't be dominating each other. And to that end, she hears about America. America, the land of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of property is what John Locke would say, but we changed it to happiness. She goes there, and what she finds is slavery, gender inequality, people afraid of what other people think about them. Yeah, we've got equality, but we've got fear of public opinion. And she's like, okay, so what is going on that could produce in a place that says they're about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, misery for half the people who are women, misery for a significant number of people who are black, and a lot of people looking over their shoulder being worried about what other people think of them. That doesn't sound like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So she starts studying, and what she finds is basically this. She says, so what I get is that there is a thing called morals, which morals are kind of exactly what you think. They're the set of values that members of a society profess to hold in common. We hold the value of liberty, the value of equality. We say those things, we believe those things, or at least we believe that we value them. But there's something else. In addition to morals, there are manners, and she defines manners as concrete behaviors and practices that just happen in everyday life. What we're going to think of as later on, what you've probably learned as norms. And she says, so you would think that our manners would reflect our morals, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, if we were to not be scientific about it, we would say, well, yeah, sure, I value these things and I act based on that. But she found in these huge ways that that's not the case. And she called these things anomalies. Anomalies were these contradictions between morals and manners. And that actually takes us to kind of what she gets out of what we learn from her about this picture of this invisible thing. So Comte found this organism and organs, and it's bound together by moral sentiments. Tocqueville finds that there is that each of these organs needs to be studied on its own because one society's organ could function differently than another society's organ, and also there are these relationships of power. What Martineau finds is that a society itself, this invisible thing that we're trying to make inferences about, can have internal contradictions. That's not what Comte said. He said people could be in disagreement about their beliefs. Martineau said, Yeah, or they could all believe the same thing and just not live up to them. That's a different thing than what Comte found. What else did she say? Oh, and then the other thing she gave us, well, although let's focus on that for a moment. If you encountered the idea of ideal versus real culture in an intro class, Martineau's the root of that. The other thing that she gives us is this idea of manners, which I said before is going to come to us, anybody who took intro with me. It's the idea of norms. There's this way of doing things. In my intro class, we talk about the fact that we, generally speaking, follow these norms. They kind of guide our behavior without us really thinking about it, which makes sense. We don't behave according to our morals all that often. We kind of behave according to what the situation tells us. But if there are contradictions there in terms of what we say we believe and what we actually do, that's going to create problems. And obviously we see that in America. America explodes into a civil war not long after Martineau is there. It also explodes in sort of a longer term way in terms of a movement for gender equality that ends up having stops along the way and getting voting rights, and then getting closer and closer, although not really achieving it, but closer to equality in the workplace. So she exposes that idea of a society can have internal contradictions. All right, that is it for this unit. So these people, Comte, Tocqueville, and Martineau, are the first ones to start grappling with, okay, so we see these patterns, what must this thing be that produces it? Next week, we get into Karl Marx, who is going to have insight after insight after insight. He's also going to be really, really angry about it, because what he's going to see is, whereas Comte saw disorder and Tocqueville saw the fact that we could have freedom or tyranny, Marx is going to see suffering, 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 and he is going to be super motivated to analyze this invisible society to figure out why is it producing it so that we can have a revolution. But that's for next week. I'll see you then.